Joe Rogan's voice has always been one that cuts through the noise. He's been in the cage, on stage, and behind the mic for decades, and few can match his ability to break down the raw truth of a situation. But when Diddy's sentencing was finally announced, the fire in Joe's tone was unmistakable. This wasn't relief, this wasn't celebration, this was pure anger. Anger at how long it took, at how much damage was already done, and at how little the punishment truly meant compared to the gravity of what came out in court.
Like all this Diddy that's coming out. Like,
I was just going to say, doesn't that sound topical?
Jesus Christ. How about the fact that this guy was running this for decades? He was doing this for decades to who knows how many people, and everybody was scared to talk about it because he'd have them killed.
The courtroom was packed. Every camera, every journalist, every whisper in the gallery was focused on one man, Sean Diddy Combs. For years, he had walked with untouchable confidence, smiling for photos, shaking hands with politicians, and laughing on red carpets. But now he was reduced to a defendant, waiting to hear how many years of his life would be taken away. When the judge finally read the sentence, Joe Rogan said he felt the same cold disgust he'd felt watching the leaked footage from Diddy's parties. Only this time, the anger ran deeper, because what Joe saw wasn't justice. It was a reminder of just how corrupt, how calculated, and how manipulative Diddy's entire empire had always been. On his podcast, Joe didn't hold back. "You mean to tell me after everything we heard, after all the testimonies, after all the evidence, this is the sentence he gets?" Rogan said, his voice rising. He wasn't impressed. He wasn't relieved. He was furious. To him, this wasn't accountability. It was a watered-down punishment that did nothing to reflect the full scope of Diddy's actions. "You can't just throw a number at this guy and call it a day," Joe continued. Because what he built wasn't just a career, it was a machine of control, intimidation, and fear. That doesn't disappear because some judge read out a sentence.
So many horrific accusations, though, involving young singers, like children.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
It's insane.
He makes R. Kelly look like a decent guy.
Yeah.
It's so crazy.
It is crazy. And meanwhile, the guy was like hanging out with Oprah, hanging out with Obama.
Jay-Z,
Everybody.
I'm sure the Clintons were there at some point.
Maybe Bill.
I mean, everybody hung with Diddy. That's the other tricky thing. Like, Diddy hung out with everybody. And I've spoken to a bunch of people who are like, yo, great dude, like, always there for you, never asked for a single thing.
Till 1 a.m.
And then freak off.
Everybody says, get out of the house.
Yeah.
It's like the gremlins start eating after midnight.
Joe reminded his audience of what came out during trial, the controlled environments, the NDAS, the phones being stripped away at the door, the stories of guests feeling trapped, orchestrated, forced into positions where they were powerless. "That's not a party," Joe said, his eyes narrowing as he spoke. "That's not music. That's not entertainment. That's prison dressed up as glamour." And he got away with it for decades. What angered Joe most was not just the years Diddy received, but how the system had enabled him in the first place. For decades, industry insiders whispered but stayed silent. Politicians smiled and posed for photos. Other celebrities attended his events and played dumb, pretending not to see the fear behind the scenes. And now, after years of silence, all the court system could do was hand down a sentence that Joe described as a fraction of the damage done.
Well, it's just amazing how many people in the Diddy party list that are supporting Kamala, too.
Yeah, seriously. It's like insane.
Publicly, openly, all in.
Yes. It's like J-Lo was like his ex-girlfriend. and it's like now deciding she's like warning people against Trump. I'm like, well, wait a second. So how many people did she warn against Diddy?
Right.
Oh, 0. Okay.
Right.
Well, maybe we shouldn't trust her opinion.
There's so many powerful people that went and partied. Air quotes, partied. And how many of them went to the Diddy parties? Have you been paying attention to the trial?
Oh, yeah.
Trials. Wild.
Why don't they air it the same way they aired the coverage that Johnny Depp got?
I know. Why don't they? I don't know. They should. The ratings would be amazing.
Unreal.
Yeah. Like, what are you doing? Why wouldn't you air that?
What's going to happen, though, you think?
Well, Diddy's going to be in jail for the rest of his life. I think he's probably going to get.
Think he's going to sing, though?
I don't know. I don't even think it matters.
Think about it, Joe said, slamming the table for emphasis. If this was some nobody, some average guy off the street, they'd throw the book at him. They'd lock him up and forget his name. But because it's Diddy, because it's a billionaire with connections, with influence, suddenly the punishment has limits. Suddenly there's hesitation. His frustration was clear. This wasn't justice to Joe, it was optics. It was the system trying to pretend accountability had been served while protecting the same elite circles that had benefited from Diddy for years. Rogan drew comparisons to other high-profile cases. This feels like Epstein all over again, he said. One guy gets taken down, but the rest of the network, the rest of the people who were complicit, who looked the other way, they get to walk free. Where are the indictments for them? Where are the charges for the people who kept this running? Joe's anger wasn't just at Diddy. It was at an entire system built to protect men like him until the pressure became too great to ignore. The sentencing hearing itself only fueled Joe's disgust. Reports described Diddy trying to present himself as a broken man, humbled and regretful, begging for leniency. Joe mocked it outright. This guy spent decades flaunting wealth, throwing parties where people were stripped of their freedom, intimidating anyone who crossed him, and now he wants pity. Now he wants people to believe he's sorry. Give me a break. To Joe, Diddy's tears were nothing more than performance, the same manipulation he'd used his whole career, only this time directed at a judge instead of the public. But what cut deepest for Joe was how many lives had been scarred in the process. You can't put a number on the damage this guy did, he said. You can't put a number on the careers destroyed, the people silenced, the fear that kept everyone quiet. That's the real legacy of Diddy. Not the music, not the fashion, not the companies. Fear. That's what he built everything on. As Joe continued, he spoke about the hypocrisy of Hollywood. He called out the celebrities who had defended Diddy in the past, the industry figures who still pretended they didn't know what was going on. Where are they now? He asked. Where are all the people who said he was a great dude? Who hung out with him, who took his money, who went to those parties? They're silent. They're pretending they didn't see anything. And that's the problem, because this sentence isn't just about Diddy. It's about every single person who enabled him. The fallout from the sentencing was already spreading. Brands were cutting ties. Music platforms were quietly pulling his songs from playlists. Former collaborators were distancing themselves, hoping the public wouldn't remember how close they once were, but Joe wasn't buying it. You don't get to wash your hands of this now, he said. You don't get to pretend you didn't know. You were there. You saw it. And if you didn't say anything then, you're part of the reason this went on so long. For Joe, the sentencing wasn't closure. It was a reminder of how deep the rot goes in the entertainment industry. This guy built an empire on manipulation, he said, and now, even after all this, even after being dragged into court, he's still manipulating. He's still acting like a victim, and the industry is still protecting people like him. That's why I'm angry, because this isn't the end. It's just another chapter in the same story. As the episode went on, Joe's message sharpened. He spoke directly to young artists, young entertainers, and anyone dreaming of making it in the industry. If you think you need to bow down to guys like this to succeed, you're wrong. No deal, no opportunity, no connection is worth losing your dignity. Don't get trapped in their game. Don't think because they're rich or powerful they get to own you. Look at Diddy now. Look at what his power brought him. Fear, destruction, and eventually prison. That's not success. That's corruption eating itself alive. By the end, Joe's anger had become a warning. We keep telling ourselves these people are untouchable, he said. We keep acting like no one can bring them down. But the truth is, one courtroom, one camera, one moment of exposure is all it takes. And when that happens, the empire crumbles. Don't let them convince you otherwise. The sentencing of Sean Diddy Combs will be remembered as a landmark moment in the entertainment world. But to Joe Rogan, it was far from justice. It was a symbol of how much power and corruption can twist a system. And while the man may now be behind bars, the machine that protected him still runs. Joe's anger wasn't just for Diddy. It was for the silence, the complicity, and the endless excuses that allowed him to thrive for so long. As the lights dimmed on his podcast set, Joe left his audience with a final thought. This isn't about canceling one guy, he said. This is about exposing an entire culture of fear and manipulation that's been running Hollywood for decades. Don't ever forget that, because if you forget, they win. And we can't let that happen. Joe Rogan wasn't finished. Even after tearing into Diddy's sentencing and calling it a mockery of justice, he pushed the conversation further. He asked the question so many were afraid to confront. What does it say about our culture when someone like Diddy is allowed to rise to the top unchecked for decades? For Joe, the sentencing was less about Diddy as an individual and more about the system that created him, rewarded him, and shielded him until it was too late. He spoke about how Diddy's empire was never just music. It was about power. Look at the way he built his legacy, Joe said. It wasn't just talent. It was leverage. It was intimidation. It was compromising people so they couldn't turn on him. That's how gangsters operate. And the industry not only tolerated it, they celebrated it. They made him a billionaire. Joe pointed out how the entertainment industry thrives on illusions, carefully manufactured images of success, wealth, and freedom. But Diddy's sentencing ripped the mask away. Behind the shiny lights and red carpets was a culture of fear, NDAS, manipulation, and silence. When you look at what came out in court, you realize this wasn't about art anymore. This was about control. And if that's what the industry rewards, then we're all in trouble, Joe said. He also reminded listeners of the victims whose stories were buried beneath Diddy's glitz for so long. We can't forget the people who got crushed in the process, he said. The young artists who walked into those houses thinking it was an opportunity and walked out scarred, if they walked out at all. The people who tried to speak up and got shut down. The families who knew something was wrong but couldn't fight against his money and influence. That's who the real sentence is for, not Diddy. Joe grew more animated as he described the ripple effect of the sentencing. Media outlets were scrambling to rewrite their narratives, brands were desperately scrubbing his image from campaigns, and collaborators were distancing themselves faster than ever. You see it every time, he said. The second the hammer drops, everyone who smiled in his face runs for cover. They'll tell you they didn't know. They'll tell you they had no idea. That's bull. They knew. They all knew. They just hoped it would never come out. In Joe's view, the sentencing should serve as a cultural wake-up call. Not just about Diddy, but about how society elevates figures who are toxic behind the scenes. If we keep rewarding these guys with fame, money, and influence, we're just building monsters, he warned, and then we act surprised when the truth comes out. But the truth was always there. We just didn't want to see it. He compared it to a rigged fight, one where the outcome was decided long before the bell rang. This sentence feels like that, Joe said. Like the system already knew how much time he'd get, already knew how far they'd let this go, already knew how much they had to give the public to make it look like justice. It's not real justice, it's performance. As the podcast episode drew to a close, Joe Rogan made one final declaration. Diddy's sentencing isn't the end of a story, it's the start of a bigger one. Because if you think he was the only one doing this, you're living in a fantasy. He's just the one who got caught. There are dozens, maybe hundreds of others playing the same game. And unless people start speaking up, unless the culture changes, we'll be right back here in a few years with another name, another empire, and another courtroom circus. The anger in his voice wasn't just for Diddy, it was for the entire structure of power that let him operate for so long. Joe wanted his audience to take the lesson to heart. Don't idolize the illusion, don't ignore the red flags, and don't trade your integrity for a handshake with someone who looks powerful. At the end of the day, power like Diddy's doesn't last. It rots from the inside out. And when it finally collapses, it takes down everyone who helped build it.